Okay, good morning. Good morning. We have a full house here. Thank you for attending. We have been hearing a lot about the budget for transportation at the state, and for our first committee meeting of the year for the Transportation Infrastructure Energy Environment Committee, we wanted to hear about the impact of the proposed state budget transportation cuts, although some of that I understand may have been is in the process of being restored. So we want to hear about that, of course, as well. But Mr. Committee Director, Mr. Battle, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, sir. Just a matter of introducing our guests and,
Yes.
and let them take care of things. I just want you to know we did provide you some background information in your binder to make sure you're aware of the context of what we're talking about today.
Terrific.
So,
Thank you very
all right.
much. Well, why don't we start? Maybe everybody can introduce themselves, and start with Deputy Secretary Biddle. Biddle.
Thanks so much. Good morning. For the record, Samantha Biddle, Deputy Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation.
And good morning. I'm Will Pines, Administrator for the Maryland State Highway Administration.
Good morning, Derek Gunn, State Highway Administration, District 3 Engineer.
Hi, good morning. I'm Holly Arnold. I'm the Administrator at the Maryland Transit Administration.
Good morning, I'm Ray Biggs. I'm the Senior Project Director for the Purple Line.
And Drew Morrison, Acting Director of the Washington Area Transit Office for MDOT.
And Vic, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Victor Weisberg, Prince George County Department of Public Works and Transportation, Special Assistant to the Director.
All right. And who's sitting next to you?
Good morning, everyone. Sekinda Skinner, County Council Liaison.
Thank you. So why don't I turn it over to Deputy Secretary Biddle.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and fellow County Council members. As I mentioned, for the record, Samantha Biddle, Deputy Secretary for the Maryland Department of Transportation. On behalf of Secretary Paul Wiedefeld, we really thank you for inviting us here today to provide an overview of our final 6-year Consolidated Transportation Program, more commonly known as the CTP, covering fiscal years 24 to 29. So, as the chairman noted, getting right to some of the most recent details associated with our final CTP. Earlier this month, Governor Moore announced a 1-year restoration of about $150 million in funding from the general fund to address critical transportation needs across the state. So this added funding from the governor will enable MDOT to restore some of those previously planned reductions, and I'll get into those in a little bit more detail as we move along. This funding allows for the department to continue to drive the administration's commitment to building a more equitable and sustainable transportation system, and this is going to spur economic growth and connect all Marylanders to life's opportunities. Broadly speaking, the governor's action restores funding for local transit service, as well as highway user revenues and highway mowing and litter pickup, all things that we know are important to many Prince Georgians. Building a transportation network of the future while preserving and maintaining existing services and our multi-billion-dollar infrastructure will take tremendous investment. So when we look under the hood of the department's funding, there are several pressures on the Transportation Trust Fund which impact our bottom line. These pressures include historic inflation, increasing costs of labor and materials, as well as existing funding commitments, including the Purple Line and WMATA, dredging at the Port of Baltimore, highway maintenance, and bridge renovations and replacements. So for example, 21% of the final CTP is funded by motor fuel tax. We are seeing revenue from that fuel tax decline over time because of the increased fuel efficiency of hybrid vehicles and the rise in the number of electric vehicles. And while this is great for the environment and for consumers, it is somewhat challenging for our budget. In past years, we have also benefited from about $3 billion in COVID relief funds, particularly for our transit systems in the Washington metropolitan area and in Baltimore. But those dollars do run out this year. And this is a message and a conversation that we began to have at this past summer's MACO conference. And it's a conversation we continue through the development of our draft CTP and the CTP update that we published earlier in December of 2023. So where we started was with a $2.1 billion deficit in the draft CTP that we put out last fall. And that was unprecedented to be in a position of having to put out a balanced CTP, and we understand that That in itself caused some challenges for our local partners in understanding where the department was. We've tried to work with partners such as, Vic, my friend down at the end of the table, in having a conversation about what this would mean for us as we move forward to that development of the final CTP, and appreciated Vic's testimony last week in Annapolis in front of the Appropriations Committee, and we hear loud and clear that continued momentum is essential as we move forward with our program. So balancing the final CTP did include many difficult decisions across the state and across our modes, and it did impact Prince George's County. This included deferring construction dollars for expansion projects that had not yet begun construction. So if a project had not yet advertised as of this past December, those construction dollars were deferred outside of the program year. We also had to look at about an 8% operating cut and additional capital reductions to our State of Good Repair program as a final option. So some of those operating reductions were restored with that $150 million in fiscal '25, but those issues do extend beyond that. However, despite these challenges, we are still delivering a significant capital program to improve our transportation system. So the final CTP does include $20.2 billion of investments over the next 6 years. This will advance major projects such as the Purple Line and Southern Maryland Rapid Transit, and also supports the new FBI headquarters in Greenbelt. We will also maintain funding for safety programs and the planning and engineering for new major expansion projects, including the interchange at Medical Center Drive. Administrator Pines will get into this in a little bit more detail, but we are in no way pencils down on this effort, and we realize it's important to the county, especially the continued momentum that we're seeing throughout other strategic investments along the Blue Line corridor. For Prince George's County, the $150 million does mean fully restoring highway user revenue funding, fully restoring lots for locally operated transit system funding for fiscal '25, and for funding State Highway Administration's highway mowing and litter removal to maintain our roadways. MDOT is also committed to developing unique transit-oriented developments. We are currently studying opportunities along the Mark Penn Line, which include the Seabrook and Bowie stations. And we are working with our partners at WMATA to invest in transit-oriented development at stations in Prince George's County. We also look forward to working with the county and community on many of these projects across the county. Altogether, our final CTP leans into Governor Moore and Secretary Wiedefeld's priority of leaving no one behind. Now I'd like to hand things over to Administrator Arnold to start updates for our roads.
Thank you very much, and committee members will, hold our questions until everybody's presented. Thank you.
Great.
Administrator
Thank
Arnold.
you. Good morning again. For the record, my name is Holly Arnold, Administrator of the Maryland Transit Administration. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some information regarding MDOT's proposed budget and how it impacts transit throughout Maryland. As Deputy Secretary Biddle mentioned, to balance the impacts of the projected shortfall in the Transportation Trust Fund, each modal administration was initially directed to reduce its annual operating budget by 8% beginning in FY25. However, thank you to the recently announced aid from Governor Moore and the General Fund, the impact to MTA's operating budget was reduced from $98 million in FY25 to $36 million. The funding includes $26 million to fully restore the operating grants to the locally operated transit systems, including here in Prince George's County, and to adjust funding beginning in fiscal year '25 so that the allocation distributions are more equitable and responsive to changes in local jurisdictions' investment in transit service. $28 million is also going towards our commuter bus service. While our commuter bus ridership has not reached pre-pandemic levels, we understand the importance the service has to connecting citizens to job centers, to addressing the climate crisis by reducing carbon emissions, and to our roadways by reducing congestion and promoting safer and healthier streets for our entire region. We're currently evaluating possible service options while carefully considering rider and equity impacts, and we're preparing for public hearings to be held this spring. We hope to have this information available soon for review and comment because we understand the importance of the public input in this process. Additionally, $8 million in funding will continue to support the Mark Brunswick line service to West Virginia while advancing expansion of midday service subject to CSX agreement and BPW approval. It was also necessary to implement some changes to the capital budget, but MDOT will continue to prioritize to ensure that all federal discretionary grant matches remain fully funded to keep our projects moving forward. The Purple Line, a critical project here in Prince George's County, remains fully funded and is now more than 63% complete. The Purple Line light rail vehicles are expected to be delivered to the Glen Ridge Operations Maintenance Facility later this year. We're also advancing the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project, or SMRT, with the goal of providing high-capacity rapid transit service in the Maryland 5 US 301 corridor, relieving severe traffic congestion and gridlock. That project maintained its $20 million of state and federal funding, and MTA is looking forward to continuing to work with Prince George's and Charles counties to advance the project through the National Environmental Protection Act. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on the important work currently underway at the Maryland Transit Administration, and I'm now going to turn it over to Drew Morrison.
Thanks, Holly. So as mentioned, I'm Drew Morrison, Acting Director of the Washington Area Transit Office, which oversees the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or WMATA or Metro, for MDOT. And as you know well, hundreds of thousands of Marylanders rely on WMATA services every day, which is why Secretary Wiedefeld includes Metro as one of MDOT's modes. The transit agency is an integral part of Maryland's transportation system, and Maryland, along with Virginia, D.C., and the federal government, play a major role in funding Metro Rail, Metro Bus, and Metro Access to paratransit service. We've been closely working with our partners in Prince George's County as we work to address the fiscal year 2025 fiscal cliff that affects WMATA. So I'll speak briefly to where we stand in WMATA's budget process, our budget process, and the legislative process to implement all of this. So currently, WMATA is continuing its formal budget process, which will include a Maryland public hearing in March that will give Marylanders an opportunity to weigh in on the draft budget being put forward today, actually, at WMATA. That budget assumes no increase in subsidy levels, and so what the public is seeing is a budget that incorporates large impacts to bus and rail service, Metro Access service, and fare policy. So in addition to the WMATA public hearing, the Washington Suburban Transit Commission, on which Chair Olson sits, will also be hosting a public forum in February to engage the public on the fiscal year 25 situation. But as we move from the WMATA budget to the Maryland budget, the governor's budget includes an additional $150 million in operating funding for WMATA in fiscal year 25. And we're seeing encouraging signs from our partners in the district and in Virginia that they will increase their operating subsidies as well. The one thing that we need to do on our side to implement that subsidy increase is to change the state law to reset the 3% subsidy growth cap that exists. We're working with Senator Augustine and his House colleagues to advance that legislation. We appreciate that Vic was able to emphasize the importance to the county of this legislation this week in Annapolis. And when we take this together, the increased subsidy and the cap legislation, we believe that we'll be able to arrive at a place where we can have a reasonable conversation about fair service and fiscal management policies on how we ultimately arrive at a fiscal year 2025 budget that works for Marylanders for the Metro system. And under Secretary Wiedefeld's leadership, we have substantially increased our coordination with Prince George's and with Montgomery on these regional transit issues, and we're going to continue to do that as we work through this and other issues. So I'll hand it over to Will with SHA, who will talk more about that program.
All right. Well, good morning again, and thank you, Drew. Again, for the record, I'm Will Pines, Administrator for Maryland State Highway Administration. In October, as was mentioned, we were here at the Prince George's County CTP tour to present our 6-year Consolidated Transportation Program. Since then, the department has made some tough decisions to address the multi-million-dollar gap in the program. And I'm going to be purposely a little repetitive with some of the things the Deputy Secretary noted in her comments, specifically on the budget, but primarily focused on the impacts related to SHA. In the capital program, we removed $438 million in construction funding for all major expansion program projects that were not going to be advertised by the end of 2023. In Prince George's County, $54 million in construction dollars were deferred from the I-495 Medical Center Drive Interchange project. Design and engineering phases remain fully funded, so SHA is committed to moving forward this project. So if funding becomes available, we are best positioned to move in construction. Over the 6-year program, there is $651 million reduction also in state of good repair funding, which impacts projects such as the resurfacing of MD 977 from Maryland 414 to Maryland 202, and restricts our ability to replace aging critical maintenance equipment like dump trucks, tractor mowers, and bucket trucks that are beyond the replacement cycle. To address the funding gap, SHA also reduced its operating budget by 8%, which is roughly $27 million. These reductions impact several routine maintenance functions, including litter, mowing, brush and tree removal, drainage, and curb and gutter repairs. However, Governor Moore, as was mentioned, announced the infusion of that $150 million to the Transportation Trust Fund to support Maryland's transportation needs. And of that $150 million, SHA received $10 million for litter and mowing, and those dollars will enable us to continue the current frequencies of mowing and litter cycles that have been more positive in the recent years, while also supporting some of our critical equipment needs to support litter and mowing for the longer term. In FY23, we spent nearly $2.9 million on litter pickup in Prince George's County, which accounted for 19% of the total litter expenditure statewide. During this period, we enhanced the pickup frequencies and emphasized programs such as the Operation Clean Sweep, which targeted highly traveled and littered corridors during the peak travel periods. In fiscal year 25, almost $3.5 million is budgeted for litter cleanup in Prince George's County. Investments like the $10 million from Governor Moore are essential to manage the litter challenge, and we recognize that it's both a safety and an aesthetic issue. But we also need your help in educating constituents on the harms of litter, because certain areas are re-littered on a near daily basis. In FY22, we spent $11.6 million on litter removal, resulting in over 6,500 truckloads of waste removed. In contrast, in FY23, we increased our litter expenses to $15 million, resulting in over 9,000 truckloads removed. However, we could have continued to increase those costs to remove even more, but these expenses cut from other precious state dollars and reduce our ability to deliver on other critical infrastructure projects. We must stop litter at its source to make a real lasting difference. While the reductions in both the capital and operating programs were necessary to balance the budget, our core mission and goals do not change. Under my leadership, SHA is dedicated to creating a culture of safety and advancing critical infrastructure projects that will connect Marylanders to jobs and economic opportunities. We will provide a multimodal transportation system that is safe, reliable, and accessible for all users. Whether traveling on bike, foot, transit, or in a car, we want to get you to the destination that you want to go safely. To do this, we will reimagine our highway network and what it supports for the needs of our community. Highways are not built only to move cars, but also to move people. And so no matter which mode of transportation our customers choose, we want them to be able to travel safely. In 2023, SHA released Maryland's first Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or what we refer to as the PSAP. That is a data-driven tool that will enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety for communities across the state. And we were able to retain nearly $100 million to advance design for the first 5 PSAP corridors. In November, we opened the US 1 trolley trail, which was announced at that opening that 2 of the 5 corridors being advanced were here in Prince George's County. These locations are the Maryland 410 project in Hyattsville from Queens Chapel Road to Riggs Road, and Maryland 650 from I-495 to University Boulevard. In the planning and design efforts for the PSAP projects, our team will look at roadway improvements to improve safety for vulnerable users by applying countermeasures like continental crosswalks, pedestrian hybrid beacons, leading pedestrian intervals, and barrier-separated bike lanes, and more. As you'll see in the final CTP, progress on the $285 million Maryland 4 Suitland Parkway interchange is continuing to move forward with construction and is fully funded through FY 2029. The Diamond interchange will address escalating traffic volumes, particularly during peak hours. And through roadway realignments, improved intersections, and advanced signaling systems, we're working to create an environment that promotes safe and efficient movement through the corridor. We're also happy to report that the CTP includes funding for design, right-of-way, and construction for the interchange to support the relocation of FBI headquarters to the Greenbelt Metro site. We look forward to continuing our partnership with the county to move forward this critical project for the state. SHA is poised to leverage every available federal dollar to us. That is also why we're resubmitting the Maryland 210 Bicycle and Connectivity Project for a RAISE grant that was provided through the IIJA or BILL program. This project will create a 2.4 mile long shared use path on Maryland 210 in Oxon Hill, connecting several existing trails and residential communities to the National Harbor. We appreciate the support of the county and members of the state delegation as we forward this grant into the application process. Collaboration with our local governments and the community is key to our success. We look forward to our continued partnership. And as I move into closing here, I want to provide you an update on SHA's effort to address safety along the Capitol Beltway. Safety on our system is our top priority. We're working to find interim improvements where feasible in the Beltway to improve safety, and we're also investigating longer-term solutions that may be further pursued to study if funds become available. I also want to take a moment to thank Derek Gunn, who's joined me here today. He's our district engineer here in District 3, and he and his team do a lot of great work to deal with local issues and help resolve constituent issues for your team. And of important note with him, he has another important meeting at 11 a.m. And so if you want to get into any really detailed questions or technical things, please leverage him for the SHA stuff, ideally prior to his departure. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to the Deputy Secretary.
Thanks, Will, and thanks, everyone. If it's all right, Mr. Chairman, just a few closing comments. Thank you to everyone. And Derek, I will be quick because I know folks probably have a few questions for you before you have to head out. I just did want to acknowledge and thank the tremendous partners that we do have here in Prince George's County. Things like the FBI, relocation would not have been possible without a partnership and a dialogue that's extended, over the years. Conversations like the one we're having today are an important step towards building and rebuilding the program that will meet and hopefully exceed the needs of Prince George's and also the region, because we know that these projects, some of them are within county boundaries, but they also have impacts across the region. And just know that we do understand the impact of some of the reductions that were in this final program, and we're committed to being strategic and thoughtful with every available resource. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Deputy Secretary and administrators and everybody else who's here. We really appreciate your collaboration. And, obviously it's a tough budget year, but we appreciate the restoration of funds. I know we'll probably want to get into some priorities and perhaps some questions. So, Councilmember Fisher, you were first on the list. You asked to speak first, so I'm sure you've got some good questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for all of you, especially Mr. Gunn, who I feel like has seen me from like a little advocate to a delegate to here, and all his hard work. And Mr. Pines, thank you so much as well for your hard work. And I can't see Mr. Biggs as well. We met recently about my district. So these are just general questions, and there are even things that maybe you could just email Mr. Chair to get back to us, so nothing that you have to take too long. But I know, I'm sorry, I can't see you at the end. Sorry, Mr. Morrison, you talked about some state legislation that you all were supporting. Would you mind sending some of that specific legislation so in our other committee for General Assembly we could take a look at? Maybe there's some that we want to support as a county that would be helpful.
Happy to send that.
Thank you. And then the other one, I think Mr. Pines, I don't know who said it, but somebody talked about the litter collection. And I know that Senator Charles, now Senator Nick Charles, had a bill about the scheduling being public for when, I don't know if it passed or not, but there was a bill about the scheduling for pickup and grass maintenance was supposed to be public. If you could tell me if it passed, and if it did pass, where is the schedule so that we could access that?
So we do have a website that provides our cycles for litter cleanup, and it actually shows each route. You can click on it and see when it was last done, and provides a cycle for that location. So I'm sorry, I don't know the website off the top of my head, but after the meeting, we'll follow up, and it's called a litter dashboard. If you wanted to search it, State Highway Litter Dashboard, that'll allow you to actually check
Yeah,
the
if you could
cycles.
Mr. Chair, send us a link, that'd be great.
Sure.
So we're not sure if that scheduling bill passed though or not. I don't think it did.
Deferring to my legislative colleagues, but I do
It
not
didn't?
know.
Okay.
But I think that we had some really productive conversations at the end of last session, and we knew that the team was already working on this dashboard. So that was a big part of kind of working through that. And I think, Will, it's been online for a few months, and
Okay.
we're happy to take feedback. I think everyone's kind of a beta user right now, so we'll send the link over to Mr. Chairman and get that out to everyone.
That would be great. And then I see they're quick, Mr. Chair. And then my follow-up question is, I know you talked about education and litter, and our county does a lot to educate, but as we are a gateway into the great state of Maryland, and we do have people passing through, it's not always educating our residents, it's people that come through our community. I was wondering if you all we do have like a rolling camera that does tickets for litter. I look at the state and I'm like, I'd definitely be paying these speeding tickets. Can we get some litter camera tickets, and you flash the license plate and give someone a ticket for tossing things out, and what the possibilities of that would be in pursuing. So that would be very interesting. And I'm not saying they have to stay in Prince George's all the time. You could move them around to different state highway roads throughout the state to help with that.
Thanks. Happy to see where that's been a tool used differently. I think you make a great point though about the regional travel that's experienced here. So maybe another strategy that we could look at on the education side would be to kind of work with our partners at COG and try to see like what we can do maybe more regionally in terms of making sure that education surrounding litter isn't just something that we're focusing on specific jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
You all set? I know Mr. Harrison was in the queue next, but I'll go to Mr. Burrows after Mr. Harrison.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank each of you for joining us today to give us this presentation. Thank you for your leadership to the citizens of the state of Maryland. My question is, I'm circling back around to that $150 million in mowing and litter, and you said 19% in Prince George's County?
That was the prior expenditure, yeah.
Okay. So I remember when the Blitz was rolled out, and it was a very successful Blitz. I mean, the work that you all did to ensure that this trash and mowing got taken care of was great. But what I'm noticing now is the trash is starting to come back again. And I know through prior presentations you were talking about the amount of money that's being spent in order to pick up this trash. And in my district and Mr. Burrows' district, we have communities like Charles County, St. Mary's, Calvert, all travel through 210, Route 5, 301, that come through Prince George's County. Whatever destination that they're going to, they travel through our community. I notice a difference, though, and I'm not trying to sound a little bit biased, but I do notice a difference in the way other counties, the attention to detail of trash pickup compared to where we are. I know Prince George's County is 499 square miles. My district has a lot of state roads in it as well. And so we get a lot of the calls that come to the office. I mean, and I realize it's the people that are dumping the trash is our community and other communities that are doing it. It just doesn't randomly show up magically. So I think education is a big thing. Just that messaging around trash. I would like to hear something about that. You talked about the website. Have you all also looked at a dashboard? Have you also looked at an app that there's people in the state of Maryland or in Prince George's County that everyone has a cell phone, everyone could download that app, and it'll be user-friendly where they can report certain things, because our offices field a lot of complaints when it comes to trash pickup on state roads. And we have a process where we have to go through 311, and the constituent, Prince Georgian, has to go through 311 to report it, and then they get a number, a transponder number, and that 311 representative works with the agencies to, provide the remedy. So we're all trying to deal with this. So honestly, I don't know if 19% is enough for Prince George's County. So that would be my question about, have you looked at funding formulas, how much we really have to allocate to make sure that we eradicate the trash pickup? Thought about the app that would make it more user-friendly for people to report certain things or suspicious things that are happening. And to Councilmember Juanica Fishers about the cameras of catching these individuals. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Sure, I could take a couple of those. I'm going to make a note about the 19% so I don't forget. So in terms of reporting, I meant the litter dashboard is really to report out what our cycles are and specifically where cleanup has happened. But to report in requests for service on anything, we have a customer care management system. It's referred to as CCMS. That also is on our website that allows you to go in. I don't think it has an app version. I can look into that with our IT department. We are planning to make some improvements in the system that will reduce the amount of data that the user has to input and leverage our existing system information. For example, using if the person reports it through their phone, if they're okay with location services, we would ping where they were instead of making them fill out a lot of details about where this happened. So things like that, we are making improvements to try to make it easier for the customer to report, but we have a robust electronic system for reporting issues today. One other thing that we're doing, only a small fraction of our litter removal today is done through the Adopt a Highway program. When we do have Adopt a Highway locations, they are pretty successful in partnering with the community for them to get engaged. We do still have to send our crews to kind of help keep the frequency levels there. But we're working on rolling out a improvement to where that's all done electronically. Folks will be able to see what corridors are available to sign up instead of going to our shops and having to kind of have a back and forth on that. So we have some technology upgrades. The app idea, I'll take that back to the team and see what opportunities are there. In terms of the 19%, there's two ways to look at that. From a dollar perspective, Prince George's County receives the highest allocation for litter budget of any county. That's one metric you can kind of speak to, and it's rather sizably more than any other county. However, from a per mile basis, the county also has more miles than any other county. And so it is only the second highest from a per mile basis. So
that one.
yeah, well, it's tough. We have to, our budgets are based on keeping up with the frequencies.
Right.
We do put out contracts. We have bid history, and that drives some of how the allocations have to happen. Some areas are more expensive to clean up than others. So it's a tough thing to make sure that we're keeping it up with our frequency statewide, and I think the allocations are really kind of based on that.
Okay. Well, if you could look at that app, because I got a lot of other questions, but I'm not going to do that, Mr. Chair. If you could just look into that app, I think that would be very helpful to the community, how they report in, because that would take some weight off all of our offices if we had the opportunity to utilize that app.
I think one other thing we can maybe look at as an interim measure, and correct me if this isn't already in place, is looking at just making sure that while our dashboard right now is reporting on the cycles, people might go there thinking that it's a place to report. So we can make sure that there's a link to our CCMS from the dashboard for folks who may end up there just through, looking up state roads and litter.
And
So
that's bilingual, right?
there may be a way to to modify the page, but that's a great point, and making sure that that is fully accessible as well, I think is something we should look at.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
thank
Chair.
you, and hopefully we can come back around for a second round of questions. I know Mr. Burrows had a question. I see we're also joined by Chair Ivy. It's great to have you here. It's all right.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for having me. This is my first TIE meeting. Look forward to working with you this year. To the litter issue, it's such a big issue. When I first ran in my special election, I thought people wanted to talk about the schools or about healthcare. I mean, it was top of mind of so many of the constituents having roads and neighborhoods that reflect the dignity of the people who live there. I'm not sure that it truly is an education issue. People know they're not supposed to litter. You know, we educate children. These are, especially on 210, these are grown people. So anything we can do to beef up the enforcement, like the cameras that Councilmember Fisher recommended. I know on some of the county roads we're supposed to have some of these cameras, but we need enforcement and we need punitive repercussions. And so whatever we can do to make that happen on 210, please let me know. I want to be a part of that. Secondly, what is the status of, how is the PLA going on the Purple Line?
Appreciate the question. I believe the last time this question came up, we talked about the labor agreement. All of those were in place for the construction piece. And the conversations are going for the operating piece, where we're working with Holly and MDOT into working on those, so those conversations have started.
Cool. Anything I can do to be helpful with that, please let me know as well. And then lastly, Mr. Pines, you mentioned a grant as it relates to trails at National Harbor. Anything that I can do to be supportive of that, please let me know. I represent that district. I'm sure that Senator Muse and our delegates are fully helping you out in that regard, but anything that I can do as the council member for that area, please let me know.
Thank you. In the past, for grant applications, we typically get a letter that goes along with the grant for support, so we'll be looking for that.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Madam Chair? Chair Ivey?
I know we've discussed litter, and you know, as Mr. Burrows was just saying, people know that it's wrong, but they do it. Now, the cameras that we do have for county roads are really focused on illegal dumping areas, and you know, that's certainly a big concern when you see a mattress or something like that. It needs to go. But a big problem we also have is just people throwing stuff out the window when they're driving. And I'm not sure exactly if the cameras that we're talking about could catch that, but if it is possible, I really want to emphasize that that would be a huge help. I have personally seen someone throw something out of a truck window, and it had the name of the company and the phone number and all of that. And let me tell you what, I'm driving, I shouldn't have confessed this, but I'm taking pictures, I'm calling the company's phone number, and I went off, right? And the woman who answered, you know, she assured me she was going to take care of it with that driver. I have no idea if that happened. But, you know, we also have to be alert to the fact that sometimes people like me can go a little far, and I'll be like honking at people and stuff, and you can get yourself killed out there, right? So we need technology to help us, because the average citizen, you know, we don't want to get ourselves shot because somebody threw a Coke can out the window. So it's really important that there are punitive actions taken against litterers, because it's damaging to the whole community. And, you know, and the people who do it do not care. But so I do not care about them, and I want them held accountable. And it's litter, it's dumping, and the more cameras that you all can help us with, I've got a stretch on Tuxedo Road that is just, you know, for a while we started calling it the, Tuxedo, like marina kind of a thing. There were so many boats that were yacht club. Yeah, Tuxedo Yacht Club. It got to be known as, because we had so many boats dumped there. How people decide that's a great place to dump boats, I don't know. We've had boats, jet skis, yeah, and Rick Shagog, He's been awesome. He's really helpful, but it's just a problem. So when we know that there's a problem area, having a camera there, there's even a bridge. You could put the camera right on the bridge and look right down on the people. It'd just be awesome. I would love it if you all could put a camera there. And even if it were a fake camera with a sign saying, "We're watching you," if that would deter people. But anyway, I just want to reiterate what my colleagues have already said, and I'll stop now. But yeah, we're really done with litter.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, and I think, hear you loud and clear, and that there's, just like we take a multi-pronged approach to roadway safety, I think that there can be a multi-pronged approach to how we're really addressing this. I think it's really important. So to the extent that we can have renewed or refreshed conversations with law enforcement partners to, pick their brains and see like what they're observing out there, and where where they have available resources to assist as well. And I think looking at the cameras needs to be part of it, because we all know that their hours are stretched in other areas as well.
Well, perhaps State Highway Police has the bandwidth to catch litterers. It's not happening with our county police. They really are stretched thin as it is.
No, certainly, I hear you there. But the corridors like 210 and others, while they're patrolling for other safety-related things, I think that our partners at MSP have always been willing to hear us out when we have challenges along our system.
Okay. Thank you. Oh,
I could just quickly add too, we do have a quarterly coordination meeting with the Maryland State Police. I brought this issue up about trying to have high visibility enforcement and finding targeted locations. So we are having ongoing discussions about that. It did come up that in metropolitan areas, there are often agreements between the county police and the state police about the coverage of areas. And so the state police kind of pushed back a little bit that some state routes may not actually be covered by the state police. And so we're having conversations around how do we get better at this.
okay. And a reminder, we only have Mr. Gunn for another 9 minutes. So I'm going to ask a question or two of him, and I know Mr. Denoga has a question as well for him. So you talked about the PSAP quarters. And before the meeting, we talked a little bit about some of the low-hanging fruit that I think we can focus on in terms of pedestrian safety and bicyclist safety, and narrowing the roadways. Some of our state roads are pretty wide, going through our pretty densely populated areas. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the PSAP corridors? You mentioned, and I'm sorry, Ms. Fisher isn't here, the Maryland 410, Queens Chapel Riggs. That is an area that I mentioned to you before. What were the other areas of that? It's the middle button.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, council member. And just before I start that conversation, I did want to kind of close the door on litter. It's a very personal conversation for myself. There are some exciting opportunities right now between ourselves and the county to look at some research opportunities to really kind of get a handle on trends and hotspots and different things with litter. One reason we want to do that is because we know there's a lot of precarious activity in terms of our folks going out there and collecting litter for work zones. So we want to make sure that we put them in a good place too. So there are some good opportunities going on right now to try to battle the litter concerns. To the PSAP is the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan. In Prince George's County, there are two corridors that we're kind of pushing forward with. Maryland 410 near Hyattsville Crossing, all the way to Riggs Road, to about Queens Chapel.
Right.
And then Maryland 650, where it kind of crosses borders between Montgomery and Prince George's.
Right.
Right now, there are active concepts being developed, and we're going to push those forward through design very soon. We're looking at a whole suite of different types of improvements. You mentioned a few of them, council member, in terms of lane narrowing, potentials to change the footprint of the corridor to make it a little bit multimodal accessible. So we're very excited about the PSAP. There's dollars associated with it, and we think that it'll add a lot of value to those communities that we're deploying those forward with.
And I have to imagine those are not big ticket items. I mean, they cost something, obviously. I mean, but it's not like you're doing a $20 million project, right? I mean, some of these are lower cost fixes, right? So
Yes.
are we looking at potentially expanding those? I mean, we have, I talked to you a little bit about, Lanham Severn Road. I know you and the engineers are looking at that because it's just a dangerous high-traffic road and no pedestrian accommodations hardly.
Yes, so we're being imaginative with the PSAP. We're not trying to hold ourselves back. We do have some low-hanging fruit, lead pedestrian intervals, crosswalk upgrades to more high visibility, but we're also looking a little bit more broad brushed along the PSAP corridors. The message that we've been sharing at our district is that that doesn't preclude us from looking at other corridors within our district. We want to make sure that we're being responsive to safety all around the district. Okay. So if there are concerns and we know them or folks know them, we want to tackle those as well.
Great, okay. And before I go to Mr. Denoga, I did want to, mention that I'd like to get together with you about an east-west connection, bike ped connection between, the WBNA trail area all the way through New Carrollton that would connect to Purple Line at Beacon Heights, as well as then back down to the trail system in College Park and even beyond. I've mapped it out. I've got it all figured out. We just need to get it done.
Sure.
And DPWT, we need their help in park and planning as well. But and then the last thing is the flexible posts. We talked about US 1. Previously when that was planned, SHA said you can't do that for the bike lanes. But now I'm hearing that we are able to use the flexible posts, so I'd definitely like to see that explored.
Sure.
Obviously, I want to talk to the City of College Park and the 21st delegation, but I know that that's something that I think that would be super helpful.
Thank you, Council Member, and I'd love to have follow-up conversations with you about both.
Great.
Both
And
situations.
Mr. Denoga, I know I had a question for you.
Real quick question on litter. We talked a lot about litter, but you talked about all the truckloads of litter that you're taking out. Is there not a prioritization, is there data as like where the worst offending streets are? Like we always got to go back, because in my experience is every time anybody, whether it's DPWT or you guys clean something up, the next day it looks terrible. But is there like the top 10 list that you could share, or do you not keep that data?
I wouldn't say there's a top 10 list, but that kind of speaks to those opportunities that I was discussing a little bit earlier about collaboration with the county to try to identify where some of those corridors are. We know a little bit from anecdotal, like Administrator Pines mentioned, we have our customer care management system. So that kind of gives us a swath of, from a user standpoint, where the corridors of concern are. And then our folks, our maintenance crews as well, they kind of have a good beat on that as well. But we are kind of working towards that, and that's the whole point of that effort, to kind of have data to back us up where we're spending our resources.
Because simply, I think that'd be helpful if we knew, because from my driving around, all the roads are bad, county and state. But your crews probably have a better sense of the ones that are just driving them crazy and they're constantly dealing with.
And if I could speak to this for a second. So it's important to note from the customer care system, oftentimes there's a little bit of a frustration. Folks think, hey, I'm going to send in a ticket because we want you to clean up this ramp. Stop everything that you're doing countywide and go do that ramp now. That's not how we operate. We operate where we have planned cycles. We need to do that with scheduling contractors and coordinating around weather. So it is a methodical process that we hit all these areas over time. And I think that's part of the reasons why when you say, like, what are the worst offenders, we have the feedback and we know which areas maybe have more cleanup associated with them. But, like,
well, I think earlier on you were asking for our assistance and cooperation, and that's where I'm going to. If I knew the worst places in my district, then I could talk to the community leaders in those areas. So that's all I was going at, is how we could be more helpful to you if we knew the worst, even though everything's not good.
No, we appreciate that, Council Member, and that kind of gets back to unfortunately, we have our cycles, but we know there's an ebb and flow, where if we're on this X amount of cycles and in certain areas that, it picks up a little bit more than other areas. So.
Yeah, and the other question I wanted to ask about is a safety issue. And I think this might have come up in the past. I know there was a very terrible bus accident a few months ago on a ramp hitting a parked truck, and CBS News, or one of the stations, I think CBS, ran a story about this has been an issue in a lot of places, and we have a lot of this going on in the county. I'm sure it's all over the state, but I don't see any enforcement from state highway or, state police. I don't know what state highway does about this in terms of targeting it. I don't think the county police are authorized to write tickets on vehicles parked along the shoulder at ramps, but I know for me, the one that I use consistently has not had a truck or a series of trucks for the last year. It's 198 southbound onto I-95 going eastbound to southbound 95, right next to the Schweitzer Lane Business Park, there's 3 to 5 trucks parked overnight all the time, including this morning. But is that something that the state is interested in? Because the flip side of that is, well, these trucks need someplace to go. Okay, well, they do need someplace to go, but creating a dangerous situation is probably not the answer to the place to go.
So that's a issue that I know is near and dear to our Assistant District Engineer of Traffic, Peter's heart, in terms of activity on the shoulders, particularly with trucks, where the state highway can come in immediately. It's kind of setting the stage from a regulatory standpoint. If there's not a no standing or a no parking sign in place, we can look at that. And then that gives us some leverage to work with enforcement to give them the ability to kind of enforce those conditions. So it's on our plate, and if there's specific corridors, council member, we can work with you very closely, like 198.
Yeah, 198 eastbound to southbound, and then 95 going westbound to the opposite side of the street. They hover there because there's a business park there. I have a general question, not for Mr. Gunn. If anyone has a question for Mr. Gunn, I'll defer.
Okay, anybody, any other questions, Mr. Gunn? Yes.
Real quick question. So, thank you, Councilmember Denoga, for raising that point, because I see a lot, I'm trying to figure this out, but this Wawa that sits off 301, where the new light at Marketplace in 301, it looks like a truck stop now. Are people parking these trucks on the side of the road, and you're trying to get in and out of the gas station, is blocking visibility? Wanted to know if that's does Wawa own that land right there that sits off 301, and they're allowing trucks to park there? I'm just trying to figure out how that's possible.
Thank you, council member. So at that location, I know we have the new signal, and we're kind of looking at operations and trying to make sure it's efficient out there. Truth be told, I need to take a little bit of a deeper dive in there to understand the concern a little bit more, but it's a rotating concern where if you kind of do something at X, then the trucks find a new place to kind of station. But we're working on it, and I'll get back to you.
Okay, and any more questions from Mr. Gunn? I think Mr. Burrows had his hand
Just
up.
one quick thank you. There is the exit ramp from 50 up onto Columbia Park Road. A community group got together and wanted to clean it. You all worked with them. You shut the whole ramp down and let people really do a deep clean. And they went all the way into the brush, and they got a huge amount of trash out. They did it again. They did it once before, but this time with your help to really shut it down and make it easier and safer to do, it really made a difference. So thank you. I have other areas where that would work. I'm not sure I could get that same group to come out and help, but there are other areas that need that kind of cleaning, but thank you for helping them do that.
Thank you, council member, and for obvious reasons that you know, that I'm happy that we were able to help out with that, so I'll share that thank you with Rick and the crew.
Okay, Mr. Gunn, if you'd wait for one more question from Mr. Burrows, then we'll let you go on your way.
And I'm not 100% sure that this is your area, but as we talk about 210, one of the other major complaints that I hear is during grass cutting time. 210 generally has very high grass, and when the contractors come out and cut the grass, they essentially shred the litter and leave the litter behind. And so it was my understanding that maybe the grass cutters are different than the litter picker-uppers. And when the grass cutters come through, we'd have a lot of debris all throughout the road and on the side of the road. So that's one concern. And then another concern is, at one point in time, I asked the town of Forest Heights to maybe come and help to do some of the work. And I know there are other municipalities throughout the state that have MOU agreements with State Highway, but the reimbursement was so low that it didn't make sense for Forest Heights would be spending way more money than the reimbursement would allow. And so have you all looked at that reimbursement figure?
Short answer, yes. So we're kind of looking at that right now. There's a little bit of a hodgepodge going on. We do have a lot of MOU agreements with the municipalities, and we want to kind of make sure that's standardized. In the sense of Forest Heights, we did kind of work to an angle where they can come out as needed to support operations. So it's not that type of MOU, but it's almost like a supplemental situation. Okay. So we were kind of able to meet them in the middle.
Okay.
All right. Good. thank you, Mr. Gunn, for joining us this morning, and we want to, respect your time, and I think you're free to go to your next meeting. We have other questions, I think, for others, but we really appreciate you, and we'll be following up.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you. For the benefit of my colleagues, on the commercial vehicles, we've been looking at this a little bit, and Mr. Battle, I think I raised this with you, although I don't think I closed the loop. I did talk to Ms. Fisher and Chair Ivy and Chair Watson as well, because the commercial vehicles parking in neighborhoods is happening a lot, as well as alongside roads. And we're going to do something here in TIEE to bring in the Revenue Authority and others. And Ms. Skinner, I want to make sure that you hear this as well. It's been a real problem in a lot of our neighborhoods of big commercial trucks parking overnight, and it seems to cross a lot of our committees because it's Revenue Authority, it's sort of a enforcement issue, a policing issue, a Revenue Authority is under GOFP. So, but I've asked for us to do that in TIEE, and everyone's fine with that. So I think part of it is we need to find lots where people can park throughout the county, so people don't park within the neighborhoods. This is people's livelihoods, but they shouldn't bring their trucks home. So that's one piece, and then the enforcement piece is another piece of it. So we're going to try to tackle that within TIE this year. But Ms. Skinner, I know we'll be working with you and several of the agencies. I just want to mention that here. I have a number of other questions. I don't know if my colleagues have more questions, but well, let me just take a couple questions here, and then I'll continue with others. So $150 million was restored. There's still cuts. Where are we going to be seeing those cuts? I mean, I know you're going to minimize that. I know you're going to do the most with what you have, but where do you see? I mean, litter was restored. We all appreciate that a lot. Some of the projects were delayed. Is that the bulk of the cuts?
Right. So in terms of FY25, so the budget year for the governor's budget is introduced, about 50% of the operating reductions that were planned were able to be addressed through the $150 million, and about 50% on the capital side as well. And so, those restorations on the capital side largely go to the highway user revenues that are coming back to local jurisdictions, both at counties and municipalities. That brings them back up to those increased funding levels that were established through the legislature's work a few years ago.
So so that full amount is back?
That full amount is back for FY25 only. I believe it's about a $2.7 million delta for Prince George's County, inclusive of the county and municipalities.
Okay.
You have a number of municipalities,
Yes,
so
we do. And they're very concerned about that. As well.
Understood. So that's the good news for 25, or the tempered good news for 25. Some of the other capital areas where we're able to restore funds is some of the state of good repair funding for Administrator Arnold's system. Lots of unfunded state of good repair needs there. Some of those are at a level that is legislatively mandated, and so we need to think about where we are in the years to come for making sure that we are delivering a system there that is safe and in a state of good repair. We all know that there are impacts to when those activities are deferred. So when we look beyond fiscal year 25, things do become a little less certain, and so we had some productive conversations this past fall along with the Train Commission in Annapolis, and we believe that those conversations will be resuming immediately following this legislative session. We are early on in this session, and so we're going to see what ideas may be brought forward this year. But what we all know is that with the funds that we have available going forward, we really need to focus on making the most of those available investments. And so while I know that no one was happy to see the shifts that happened with projects like Medical Center Drive, the good news is that all of the funding remains there for the planning and design activities, and that those teams are continuing their work at the pace prior to when the budget was established. So it's kind of thinking about things in parallel tracks of The technical teams are going to continue advancing the work needed to get those projects ready for construction. And then there are going to be other conversations that have to deal with what happens with kind of the overall trust fund and where, where those dollars are going to come from in the future.
Okay. And I know that when you say the Medical Center Drive, that's the interchange, correct?
Correct.
So, there were, and you were all here a couple months ago, there have been concerns about that interchange. And so I
Correct.
just want to make sure that that's, we're not throwing money after something that we're not all on the same page on. So that's, maybe it's good that we're having a
It
little
is-
pause
it
here
re-
because,
I don't want to,
Yeah,
make
yeah.
more of a silver lining
Yeah.
out of this than it
Yeah.
is, because I think, ideally we would know, we would have more fiscal certainty all around. But I think Administrator Pines can maybe speak a little bit to what our thinking is on where we head next with that project. And a lot of that is going to be, thankfully from some of the feedback that we got in the fall.
okay, sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for the question. So the project has had kind of a storied history on, it started based on some developer activity, and that's kind of slowed down, but I think it's still a frontline priority for the county, given some of the desire to have more of a gateway into Largo community. So one of the things that we've sort of realized, we're near the point, based on the process and the schedule that we've worked through, to get a record of decision on the NEPA study. We don't want to do that if the vision for the project is starkly different than it was 2 years ago. And so the team is working on preparing kind of a presentation that outlines some options. I think there candidly is a little bit of a miscommunication, frankly, on some of the safety benefits of the solution that has been proposed. But we need to kind of talk through, is the goal to get vehicles quickly in and out to help deal with the stadium, let's say, or is it really to have a livable, walkable community? We need to understand the right balance between mobility and accessibility, connectivity, all these goals that interact on projects. We want to make sure we're aligned with the county on the goals there. So we're actively working on getting some materials together to come back with the staff levels and kind of work through a more detailed understanding of where we should go with the project.
Okay, yeah, and I know I believe that's Ms. Blagay's district as well, so I want to make sure that she's fully engaged in that as well. There had been a News Channel 4 report about the number of accidents on the stretch of the Beltway, and I know we had it, and we sent it along. I'm looking at Mr. Battle and Mr. Hurdle, and it was like a huge percentage of the accidents on the whole Beltway were happening in that stretch, I believe. And so, one question is, how are we addressing that? Does an interchange make that worse? I mean, there's a whole lot of questions around that, and I know we can't get into all the details now, but the fact that we've seen the data that the crashes are, there, that's something that needs to be addressed.
Yep. Yeah, we're aware of those documented reports. We did get copies of that. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
And so we, as I mentioned in my remarks, we're right now looking at the potential for interim improvements where feasible along the Beltway to improve safety. But a longer term, more comprehensive study for the Beltway, we don't have funding for at this time. It's part of the overall funding challenge. But we're taking in the information that we have and are going to look at what we can do with the funding we have. But a larger study is something we will keep on the radar to try to fund when funds are available.
That seems very important. I know Mr. Jernoga had another question, and then Ms. Fisher will be next after Mr. Jernoga. Yep. Get to you.
I'm just going back to last year's priority letter from the county and the list, just trying to see if we're on the same page. And if we're not, just understand. So the top five that I believe we had in the letter was first, the Medical Center Drive was number 1. 210 Piscataway Highway improvements was number 2. US 1 improvements 3. The Greenbelt Metro access 4, and Route 5301 from Charles County was 5. It seems like, for obvious reasons, that the Greenbelt Metro got pulled to the top. And if I understand things, looking at the CTP, TCP, did medical center get moved down, or where do you see the top 5 for the county based on what the reality of funding?
I would say that your top 5 is very well aligned with where we are, especially from a major projects perspective. I think we have things in the works on all of these. However, you make the appropriate point on Greenbelt, because that is the one where, thanks to some funding that had been set aside previously, where we do still have the construction investment ready there. So,
Well, it seems, two things that I noticed. Seems that Medical Center Drive is getting deferred because of the funding shortfall. When that was the number 1 priority, and maybe because we have some questions about exactly what we want. And the other thing is Route 1 in College Park, the one phase is finishing, but I noticed there's no funding for any even planning or design going forward. And I represent, as does Mr. Olson, but mostly myself, I represent the going forward part. So if this is our number 3 priority and there's no funding, maybe your focus is on finishing the first phase.
I will say that plays a part in it, and I think there's a lot that we look to learn from that first phase and what we can carry into those other phases to come. And I think when that corridor was initially evaluated and those phases were all established, there may be opportunities to break out smaller sections of those unfunded phases with some of the improvements that the chair has referenced. Because when we look at the entire corridor, that becomes a 50 million plus type of investment when you get into all of the right-of-way and utilities associated with going through a whole corridor, and it also involves a great deal of disruption for community sometimes. So if we can find the right balance of reevaluating what the needs are through those areas and looking to provide some solutions that do address the core needs there of both safety and mobility, I think that's something that we can relay back to Derek and his team at the district, and I'm sure that they are looking at more of those shorter interim improvements for US 1.
Okay, I guess I'll just say this, then I'll be done, Mr. Olson. There's no funding for the next 6 years for that phase. I mean, so I wasn't expecting construction next week, but when there's zero funding for the next 6 years, that doesn't suggest it's priority number 3. In addition, it's great that the work that's been done is wonderful. It's coming to conclusion, but between 193 and the Beltway, you got Cherry Hill Road intersection, which is a challenge, and it bottlenecks everything. So you're not getting, in my mind, the best value for the money you've already spent, because you've got this other bottleneck that impedes everything.
Right, and so I understand, and I know that when we look at the CTP, we look at, oftentimes we go to those pages that have the major projects on them, and we look at the cash flows and the investments associated with them. But just know that because there is not dollars associated with those corridors does not mean that there are not, staff and eyes who are looking at things on more of like the operational level. You're correct. There is not, a continuous investment in those major project funds of pots of money for those specific areas. But I think that's why we kind of balance from the development and evaluation program of major projects along with the operational teams that do involve, planning and design also at the district level. And I would ask if there's anything else Will would want to add to that.
I would just point out for Medical Center Drive, I think you're onto something there that from our team's perspective, when the project was started, there was a lot of momentum behind the developer project and the kind of economic opportunity around that project. The comments of late feel quite different in the direction that the project was heading than where it is now. And frankly, we again, as I mentioned, we kind of want to get on the same page and make sure that for the county, the priority really is still the number 1 priority. And that's sort of, I hate to say that, is it still your priority, relative to what is different from 2 years ago when the developer was at the table? So that's not.
I'm North County, so I don't know these things. Which developer are we talking about?
Well,
Largo Town Center, or are we talking the Commander Stadium, or
no, for the Town Center project?
Town Center, okay.
Yeah, so things have changed, and that has seemingly resulted in some change in the vision of the project, and we're not sure if that also means some changes in the priority of the project. So
gotcha. Okay.
That
enough said. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And not to prolong us, but it's really nice to have you, Madam Deputy Secretary. And I, in my meeting with Mr. Pines and Mr. Briggs, I just wanted to bring this up for the record about, you don't have to respond now, but maybe as you come back and work with Chair Olson, is just about how, especially in the more northern, and actually when they say more northern part, I think it's throughout the county. Prince George's County is obviously a very different place than it was 50 years ago. And just kind of the strategic thought about the walkability and transit-oriented development around our state roads, in our areas where pedestrians are really a part of that. And for me, you know, Queens Chapel Road, Riggs Road, New Hampshire, all of that, and sort of us being proactive instead of reactive to it, I'm very interested in. And then something that Mr. Biggs and I talked a little bit about for your notes was sort of what is your plan, at least on your obviously on your roads, on the state highway roads, about sidewalk and walkability to the Purple Line stops, which I know Chair Olson is also very passionate about. So that's sort of, and the safety towards the stop, because at least for me, especially on my stop on University Boulevard, Riggs goes both ways. And it's interesting, it's like intersection of East-West and Riggs, and then University and Riggs. That walkable area is all State Highway Road. And your road there, in my community, is the straightest shot to walk to the Purple Line stop, not through, like, we could, but it would be very difficult to have the county do like 23rd Avenue, because that's fully residential. It's not where people are gonna walk, and then you're down from the stop. You don't hit the stop directly by walking on 23rd. So it's really walking on Riggs from another state highway to get to that Purple Line stop. So that's something I'm wanting to hear more about later or another time.
No, appreciate that. And, you know, Chair and I had an opportunity to speak a little bit about some of the pedestrian connectivity that's currently in those plans. And I think we're going to find some time to get together and really like dive into the plans a bit, you know, get out there on the ground where we're able to. So, you know, appreciate that feedback. But then, you know, that's in regards to the Purple Line. But more broadly, I hear you 100% on, you know, where, you know, the county has been from a land use and development perspective. And we are really looking to promote projects and policies that allow and align with, you know, those more walkable connections. So I think that there are some things that we're looking at through specific transit-oriented development efforts, but then it's how do you know, there's always that point at which a TOD does have a boundary, and then making sure that everything that we're doing is really woven into the fabric of the community. So we have some teams both at our modes and at our secretary's office that are actively working through some of those opportunities right now along the Penn line. So I think we can come back to you with some of those opportunities. But if there are, you know, areas that you'd like us to dive into, or where we can, you know, look at things that may have been evaluated in the past and see what we need to do to like upgrade and be ready. Because what we don't want to do is be reactionary. We want to be able to take advantage of where we may have a developer interest, and we don't want to say, well, we could come up with a plan. We want to have that plan first. And so that's what our teams are really doing. We've really looked in at TOD as a priority. You'll see that a lot in the governor's legislative package that he put out recently, and we have been doing work over the past year to build our team to be ready to deliver.
If you don't mind me adding, yeah, and I very much appreciate the attention that you guys are bringing to this. Will and I have had several conversations, and you know, he's still new at SHA, and so we're going to start sitting down on a monthly basis to talk about the intersection between the Purple Line and State Highway roads, because we haven't done that, I think, and so we really need to dive in there to ensure that we're making great progress on the Purple Line, but folks need to be able to get to it once it's built, and so we definitely recognize and are starting that effort. And I also wanted to highlight, you know, mentioning TOD and accessibility. I don't believe it's in your district, but the College Park MARC station is not ADA accessible, and so we're going to be applying for an all stations accessibility grant this cycle to really kind of reiterating the importance of we're going to be connecting to the Purple Line, but man, how terrible is that if you can't access it from the MARC line? And so recognizing that, again, we have to make sure that those connections are better and improved as we move forward.
If I could just add one more piece. I think I talked in my remarks about the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or the PSAP. That is a published document. It's on our website. One of the things that it does is it defines where our priorities are. You know, I mentioned we got $100 million. That gets us 5 corridors. We're going to try to make interim improvements in total. The PSAP includes 23 corridors statewide. And so that came out of an exhaustive study that looked at where are the fatalities happening, how do we disperse this in a basis of equity, what are reasonable projects that are actually accomplishable. And so it's important to look at the PSAP because it does kind of help understand what's in for now in our immediate near-term plans and what's not. The Deputy Secretary talked about being proactive. I heard you loud and clear that we need to look at Riggs Road. I got that. I took it back to the team. That is not in the PSAP plan at this time. Like we mentioned, 410 and 650 are. However, I did ask the team, the current 410 program goes up to Riggs. I asked them to see if we can extend a little bit beyond, but we do have funding constraints. So we can't keep adding every road in. We got to kind of handle it methodically, but we'll see what we can do. Beyond the PSAP program, we do have some ADA improvements and some other funding pockets for safety improvements, but those kind of really start to get into spots here and there to fix things rather than the PSAP is really, we're going to nail this whole corridor and make this area better. So just to emphasize, we do have a priority program.
No, and I appreciate that, but I also think, I'm not sure how those priorities were made, and I'm only saying this, Mr. Pines, because Madam Deputy Secretary is here, so she can hear it. But I also feel that, when we have that, I do think when you make those priorities, it'd be, I don't know how the process was, and I'm sure it's numbers and other things, but I think conversations are also good, and I think conversations like with Chair Olson, he would tell you, as I would tell you, if you don't expand to Riggs Road, is the state saying probably one of the biggest entry points for the Latino community is going to be Riggs Road and the University Boulevard stop. So how is that not a priority when we are the states with we're as a state level, we're one of the most growing Latino populations in the country. And then when you zoom into Prince George's County, that Purple Line stop on University Boulevard, you're making a priority statement also to a culture and a community. And so, who is very walkable compared to any other. So I think data is important, but I also think it's important to talk to the local jurisdiction about that. And I think if there was that conversation, I think Riggs Road probably would have been included. And I think that's going to be a statement that the community that's most in apartments, that's most walkable, the main road for them to access Purple Line is not being prioritized. I wouldn't politically want to make that statement, but if that's the statement that the State Highway Administration is making, then that's what it is. But I think, that's
not the statement I made.
I'm just saying that. So I just feel like, a mentor in high school told me, your what is it? Your priorities are your budget. And I would say probably the one most walkable, underserved access points into Purple Line is University Boulevard. And Riggs Road is where that connectivity is. So I just, want to stress, I think, how important that is. I believe I'll go look, but I think Wheaton in Montgomery County side is included, and that is their higher. And if you look at Montgomery County, the Wheaton area is probably the highest Latino community that's growing over there, and I think that parity is important.
No, thank you. Just wanted to acknowledge, hearing all that, it's really helpful. And thinking about, I know that there were a plethora of criteria that went into, the data-driven process that resulted in some of the PSAP corridors. But I think you're absolutely right that sometimes there are things that have impact that outweighs, individual metrics, and a part of that is having the conversation about it. So I think the good news is that we have some time to really dive in and look at this before we're fully in revenue service over there on the Purple Line. So I look forward to coming out and really diving in with you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. I may have a few more questions, but I'm sorry?
If I can.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Weisberg.
Add a little something on that. So the county is, we have retooled and restaffed our Vision Zero team, and we're taking a deep dive at all of the numbers and all of the corridors and using the state's data. And we look forward to working with SHA, and can't emphasize enough the point that is being made about really digging in deep on where the numbers are leading us, and that connection, especially on the Purple Line corridor, We know 193. We know, Riggs Road, and especially that intersection at Riggs Road. And, we know, Kenilworth Avenue are major hot spots. 193 is head and shoulders higher than every other corridor in the state when it comes to, pedestrian crashes and fatalities. So, we know the project is scheduled to be complete in '27, but we really want to work together in terms of how can we, make improvements in the interim and really, change the corner on some of these corridors.
Thank you, Vic, and thank you for your partnership on all this. So I'm going to try to wrap us up. I do have a few things I just want to put out there. We don't have to have full discussion about them, but Mr. Denoga's point about US 1 and College Park, the next phases, when we started talking about rebuilding Route 1 25 years ago, there was not the development that we have now. The fact that we're getting the road rebuilt and the pedestrian infrastructure into place after we've added thousands and thousands and thousands more residents there, it's good that it's happening now, but that's kind of, it lagged a little bit. It's happening now. That's great. What's happening north of that is also being redeveloped as we speak. I mean, buildings are being knocked down today, to put more buildings up. So, it is important, I think, that we do get some funding in there to do some planning, that we get that road, more pedestrian friendly. So I just say that now. Purple Line, I want to thank the administrator for being here, Ray, you for being here, and your responsiveness. I know we've had a number of meetings about the road conditions, and they have been repaved. There's more work going on Veterans Parkway, even yesterday and today, I think, and we need to get that done, but appreciate that. We always knew there would be a challenge, but, thank you for your responsiveness on that. I had mentioned to the deputy administrator here that deputy secretary that the Kenilworth Avenue approach to the Purple Line stop, I'm not happy about the pedestrian infrastructure that was planned. There's still slip lanes. There's the sidewalk is next to the road. I hope we can do better. I know it's in the plans that have gone to bid, and that's all kind of behind us, but, we can go back out there and look at that again, change orders, that kind of thing, or if it can be torn out after it's built. I hate to say that, but we need to make sure that people get to the Purple Line stops safely. There's already a lot of pedestrians out there now. There's going to be a lot more, we hope, when the Purple Line opens. And I just say that you don't have to necessarily respond right now, but I did want to put that as a marker out there. I mean, you can. Yeah.
Well, I did take a look at that. We're looking at all the different places along the alignment, and those four corners are being rebuilt completely. They will have the slip ramps and all of that, but what I can do is I can send you some more information, and we can have some more discussions on it. So I recognize that you've looked at the plans and all of that, but the team is looking at it across the alignment, in particular in these high areas where the pedestrians will be traversing, to really look at the safety improvements, if any changes need to be changed to go beyond the requirements of SHA and the
Yeah,
county.
I mean, it just, we got to get it right. I just, and we had anyway, Riverdale, there's a lot of pedestrian conflicts there, and we got to do better. So thank you for looking at it more, and I look forward to working with you more on that. Mark TOD study, I'd heard that there was going to be a Mark TOD study that's going to include Seabrook Mark. What is happening with that? And I mean, I represent that area. There's land around that. There's buildings around that. People are looking to redevelop in ways that are not consistent with TOD right now, and I'm trying to hold that off. But that's without a study, we're kind of hamstrung.
Sure. I'll pass it down to Drew outside of his work.
Yes.
With Madi also is very active with our planning and real estate team.
Okay.
Yes, I've got the very long title, as you can see on the
Yes.
card. From the Secretary's office, the Office of Real Estate, in coordination with MTA, is working on a study of transit-oriented development opportunities along the Penn Line corridor with a focus in the DC to Baltimore section. Right now, we're in a stage where we are evaluating the opportunities that can then inform, what would real development potential look like? What would the strategies need to be to make things happen? So we are happy to coordinate with you, and we plan to coordinate with communities along the corridor as we have a better sense of what some of the opportunities might be to make sure that they align with local priorities. If there is interest and feedback that you're getting that might be helpful for us, we're happy to coordinate on that and make sure that we understand and can help implement a shared vision, because our goal is to have strong TOD that supports transit ridership, that creates successful communities, sustainable communities around our transit assets, and that's our goals, and we want to work on them with you.
Yeah, okay, great. I mean, yeah, sooner the better on
Understood.
all of this, of course. Yeah, we don't want to lose opportunities. And we need to talk to some of the landowners there as well. Okay, I'm just going to, there's a lot more we can talk about, but I do want to mention the bike community has brought up to me several times that in the past, where the WB&A trail comes to Martin Luther King, so 704, that the state is willing to build a trail along 704, but that the county is not willing to maintain it, and that the state said that they would build it if the county would maintain it. And I haven't been able to get the full story on this, but apparently, the bike community is adamant that this was said, and so I need to work between the county and the state to figure this out, because if we can get that trail, so do we know?
And we can work together, but I think that the issue may be not maintenance of the trail per se, but trimming the trees that are growing over onto the trail and things like that, which we would consider within the SHA right of way and part of that rubric. But that's something that we can
that may be,
discuss.
but we got to work through this.
Yeah,
this is not that hard.
Do you want to take this one?
But yeah, please.
So in existing law today, it does establish that, history here, this goes back a long ways, right? Historically, there was a period when State Highway did not build pedestrian bicycle facilities. We were the highway administration. Over time, the laws got built out to where we do build these. The current law is we build them, but the locals are responsible for the maintenance. Okay. And there's a lot that goes into this. We just had a relatively large snow in Maryland. Right. We are not equipped at the state to go out and shovel off all the sidewalks and those kinds of features. There have been discussions with different legislators about bill proposals to change this. I've had some conversations. I met with WABA recently to talk about the fact that currently, based on the way that the law is, SHA is not in position to do that maintenance. We don't have the resources, the funding, any of it set up to do that. However, we do understand that for certain localities, it's a hardship as well. So some of the bill proposals has, even maintenance in terms of reconstruction. Let's say you have a sidewalk, a tree grows under it, the root busts it up. Right. Some of the ideas that have been kicked around is maybe the state should have responsibility for major reconstruction of a sidewalk, but the localities would maintain that day-to-day maintenance, the brush, the weeds that grow in the cracks, and so we understand the localities aren't in position to take care of it. We are also not in position to take care of it. It leads to a bad place, frankly. But we want to move forward these projects. We don't want this to be an impediment. Right. We're happy to continue to work with the county. It's an ongoing struggle and a dialogue. And just
all right. Well, then I guess I'm going to have to just convene a meeting, and we got to hash it out, because this has gone on for years, and I don't know. We'll have to figure it out, because we got to get the infrastructure in place, and appreciate everybody's willingness to sit down and figure it out. That's All right, that's all I have.
I got one quick.
All right, quick.
you're gonna talk about quick, come on. All right, like, come on, man, you just had a whole, I have a quick statement, and maybe y'all can help me out. I know Mr. Gunn left, but off Route 5 at Missouri Avenue, on Route 5, right where there's an older established community, you have north and south on Route 5, which is 4 lanes. You have people jumping across the median to get over to the Royal Farms. And there's a lot of different accidents. There's been fatalities over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years where at least 5 people have perished right there. So if there's some, I really think that median right there needs to be blocked off where people can't just jump across. They have to utilize that $54 million ramp that you all just paid for on Route 5 right there and go up it and then come back down rather than trying to shoot across. So the road safety there is critical. So if you could have someone look at that and get back with my office. We've been trying to deal with that for 4 years now, and it's just, I think we're like kicking the can down the highway
I'm
right
happy to
here.
coordinate that as a follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat, Maryland 5 and?
Missouri.
Missouri, okay, thank you.
No, Moores.
Oh,
Moores.
glad you
Moores
asked.
Road, I'm sorry. There's one of the M words.
All right.
I bet Derek would have figured it out.
Yeah,
He's a pro.
All right,
Yeah,
good? Everybody good? All right, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate your collaboration, and, you know, obviously there's a lot of work to do ahead, but we can get there together, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Look
Chair.
forward to it.